She bit the expert, growled at the commander, then moved into his quarters. Alarms blared, echoing along the sterile corridors of the starship Resolute, their urgent wails bouncing off polished metal walls. Armored guards struggled at the heart of the chaos, locked in a desperate battle with a striking, untamed alien, Princess Shiara of the Maranth. Tiger-striped fur rippled across her lithe, muscular frame, golden eyes blazing with fierce defiance. Her long, banded tail lashed wildly, battering anything within reach as she fought the restraints. Braids of midnight hair snapped around her shoulders with every furious motion. "Hold her!" grunted one guard, straining against Shiara's raw strength. Shiara's lips curled, revealing fangs. She lunged, jaws snapping. Lieutenant Mason, the fleet's nervous xenocultural expert, darted forward, palms open in a placating gesture. "Easy, Princess," Mason pleaded, voice shaky. "No one wants to hurt you." Her head whipped around, teeth catching his gloved hand in a flash of motion. Mason yelped, recoiling as blood welled crimson on the pristine floor. Shiara's growl vibrated through the corridor, a deep, feline snarl that sent a shiver through the guards. "Clear the way! Give her space!" barked the security chief, shoving rookies aside as they tried to contain her. At the far end, Commander Dane watched from behind a thick pane of armored glass. Tall and lean, sharp-eyed, he took in every detail, how Shiara's muscles bunched beneath her striped coat, how her pointed ears flattened against her skull, the raw disdain in her glare. She was a caged storm, and he studied her with the detached intensity of a scientist examining a dangerous specimen. "Lock her down," Dane ordered, voice clipped. "Maximum security. Mason, get medical attention. No more mistakes." The guards tightened their hold, wrangling Shiara down the corridor, each step punctuated by her resisting every inch. Even in defeat, her bearing was regal, head high, tail slashing, gaze unbowed. The procession led to a reinforced holding cell, its steel walls unadorned, save for a single window framing the endless expanse of stars. The heavy door sealed with a final echoing clang. Shiara stood alone in the cell, her presence filling the small space, her eyes tracking every movement outside the window. Hours later, the lock hissed open. Dane entered, flanked by Sergeant Lex, a broad-shouldered woman with a tactical stance, and Technician Vera, slim and quick-eyed, clutching a scanner. Shiara did not retreat. She straightened, tail flicking behind her like a banner, golden gaze fixed on Dane with naked challenge. "You're now a guest of the United Terran Fleet," Dane said, voice steady. "Cooperation is optional, but your comfort depends on it. Aggression will be met with force. This is your reality." Shiara's lips curled, emitting a low, mocking growl. The sound was part threat, part derision, echoing in the tight space. Dane's expression never changed. "You're a prisoner of war, Princess. Your title means nothing here." A visible ripple ran through her fur, anger simmering just beneath the surface. The contest of wills had begun. Days passed. Meals arrived, rectangular trays of protein rations and recycled water. Shiara ate in silence, every motion precise, her gaze never lowering, always watching for opportunity. The guards avoided her eyes, but she studied them relentlessly. Twice each week they escorted her, always 3, never fewer, to a Spartan exercise bay. She stretched, leapt, prowled the perimeter, gold eyes memorizing every seam and shadow. Her muscles coiled and uncoiled in silent rehearsal, tail twitching as she cataloged every weakness in the security protocol. On the bridge, Dane watched it all through hidden monitors, logging her routines, moods, and the way the hues of her fur shifted with her temper. He saw how, sometimes, her eyes lingered on the viewport, the distant stars stirring something softer before she closed herself off again. Shiara was not quiet. She taunted her guards with a feline smirk, especially the rookie Officer Kai, whose nerves she played like a string, and stern Commander Sloane, whose strict discipline she mocked in flawless, accented standard. "Your rules are so many," she sneered one afternoon, flicking her tail. "Yet you still lose control." Dane denied her every request: fresh meat, more time outside, a single private conversation with her crew. Each refusal was calculated, his sharp gaze searching for cracks in her armor. Shiara's reactions varied, sometimes a cold silence, sometimes a sardonic laugh, sometimes just a flicker of wild longing as she gazed through the window at freedom she could not reach. In those solitary hours, Shiara pressed her forehead to the glass, golden eyes fixed on the infinite night beyond. For a heartbeat, sorrow flickered in her gaze, raw and unguarded, before she masked it again behind defiance. And though he would never admit it, Dane found himself thinking of her more often than duty required, her razor wit, her pride, the surprising allure of her feline beauty, and the way her spirit refused to yield, no matter the cage. The contest had only begun. Dane waited in the blue-lit shadows of the simulation chamber, arms folded, gaze fixed on the reinforced door. It slid open with a hiss, and Shiara strode inside, back straight, eyes wary, stripes gleaming in the sterile light. Her tail flicked as she took in the banks of consoles, the curved holoscreens displaying spirals of data and tactical schematics. He gestured to the central console. "Let's see your skills, Princess," he said, his voice cool but edged with challenge. "Prove your mind is as sharp as your claws." Shiara's golden eyes narrowed, a spark of fierce pride lighting within them. She slid into the command seat, fingers splayed across the interface, claws retracting so as not to scratch the controls. Instantly, her focus sharpened. Battle scenarios bloomed across the holoscreen. Star fields, fleet positions, supply lines tangled like threads of fate. She selected a scenario with a single tap. Within moments, her mind was ablade. "Flank the heavy cruisers here," she murmured, not looking at Dane. "Redirect drones to intercept at this bottleneck. Your logistics are too linear, predictable." Her tail curled and uncurled as she worked, dissecting the simulation with clinical, predatory precision. She rerouted imaginary convoys, calculated fuel burn and morale, then set a chain of decoys that lured the simulated Terran fleet into an ambush of her own design. The chamber filled with the brisk cadence of her analysis, rapid, sure, almost musical. "You could have broken their lines in minutes," she declared, glancing over her shoulder, daring him to disagree. Dane studied her, arms still crossed but his reserve shifting. He had expected arrogance, but not this level of brilliance, or the way she seemed to revel in outmaneuvering every move the simulation threw at her. "Impressive," he admitted, voice low. "You missed nothing." Shiara's lips quirked in a fleeting smirk. "That's the difference between prey and predator, Commander." Later, alarms jolted the Resolute into action, a live threat this time, not a simulation. On the bridge, tension crackled in the air as a Tigran strike force swept out of the void, ambushing a Terran convoy on the far edge of the nebula. Dane moved with purpose, eyes scanning feeds, hands steady on the command rail. He made a decision that drew more than a few raised brows. "Bring the princess to the bridge," he ordered, "under guard." Within minutes, Shiara stood beside him, flanked by two wary Marines, her gaze locked on the tactical displays, her stripes seeming to shimmer with anticipation. Live feeds showed the Tigran ships weaving in attack formation, their hulls painted with tribal sigils. Dane leaned in, voice pitched for her ears alone. "Can you see it? What would you do?" For a heartbeat, Shiara hesitated. Then, pride overriding caution, she pointed at a cluster of symbols. "Their formation's weak at Vector Delta. Commander Raoul's pride will blind him. He'll push too far, trying to split your defense and take the glory. Dane keyed in commands, adjusting Terran positioning based on her assessment. You're certain? She nodded, gaze unflinching. I know Ral. He'll ignore protocol for a chance to impress High Command, exploit that gap, and you'll break his vanguard. Her objectivity stunned the bridge crew, an enemy, analyzing her own people without hesitation or sentimentality. Dane's respect deepened, even as he felt the ground shift beneath him. As the battle unfolded, they hovered over the same console. Their arms brushed, the contact brief but electric. A current passed between them, startling in its intensity. Shira's eyes widened, vulnerability flaring before her mask returned. Dane felt his own composure slipping, the line between captor and captive blurring in the charged air. He drew a careful breath, letting the moment pass, but the memory lingered. The raid ended with minimal loss. Ral, just as predicted, overreached and was forced to retreat. In the aftermath, the bridge buzzed with muted awe. Shira said nothing, but Dane saw the pride in her stance, the hint of satisfaction in her eyes. That night, Dane's office was shrouded in half-light, the only illumination coming from scattered holoscreens. He pored over new intelligence reports, his jaw set as the pieces fell into place. Communications logs, intercepted orders, encrypted directives that all pointed to a single, chilling truth. Shira's capture had not been an accident. It was engineered. He called her in, voice measured on the comm. Within minutes, she appeared. Shoulders tense, tail flicking with unease, as if she sensed the gravity in the air. Sit, Dane said quietly, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Shira remained standing, arms folded across her chest, eyes wary. He activated a holoscreen. It flickered to life, displaying a sequence of Tigran communiques, each stamped with the sigil of House Varric. Dane watched her closely as he spoke. These are encrypted orders from your uncle, he said, tone grave, movement patterns, fleet redeployments, sudden shifts in protocol, all coinciding with the day you were captured. Shira's brow furrowed, the gold of her eyes deepening to molten amber. That's not possible. My uncle. Dane cut her off, overlaying timestamps and intercepted messages. It's all here. Varric orchestrated the patrol routes, the withdrawal of your guard. He left you exposed, knowing the Terran fleet would be waiting. Her composure cracked. With a strangled snarl, Shira lashed out, claws raking the edge of the holoscreen. The image wavered, distorting her uncle's sigil. Dane reached across the desk, catching her wrist before she could do more damage. The contact was firm but gentle, anchoring her to the moment. Your own blood betrayed you. Varric set this up. The fury drained from Shira's face, replaced by a raw, aching vulnerability. For a long, silent moment she stared at the evidence, her tail limp, ears drooping. She let out a shuddering breath, her voice trembling. He always coveted the throne, she whispered, pain threading through each word. I was just in the way. My people will suffer for his ambition. Dane released her wrist, but did not step away. I know what it is to be betrayed by those you trust, he said, voice softer than she'd ever heard from him. You're not alone in this. Shira met his gaze, her mask falling away entirely. I can't go back. Not now. If I do, he'll finish what he started. A silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of what had been lost, and what fragile understanding had bloomed in its place. For the first time since her capture, Shira allowed herself to lean, just slightly, into the space between them. Dane did not move, nor did he break the connection of their eyes. In that quiet, bruised moment, they were no longer just enemies, but two souls caught in a web of treachery, bound by pain, pride, and something perilously close to hope. Sirens wailed, shrill and ceaseless, echoing through the trembling steel bones of the Resolute. Red emergency lights strobed across the corridors, painting every face in garish crimson. The starship shuddered under a fresh barrage. Explosions thudded in the distance, and somewhere nearby, bulkheads groaned as pressure threatened their seals. Dane was already running when the comm crackled in his ear. "Commander Sloan to all decks. Section 4 is breached. They're targeting the Princess's cell. Repeat, hostile boarding in Section 4. He swore under his breath, snatching a sidearm from a wall locker as he sprinted. The corridor ahead was chaos. Smoke drifted in choking clouds, acrid and stinging. Security teams crouched behind overturned carts, exchanging fire with advancing shadows. The deck pitched, nearly throwing Dane off his feet, but he caught himself and surged forward, jaw set. He rounded a corner just as a group of black-armored mercenaries forced their way past the main security checkpoint. The Terran defenders fought bravely but were pushed back. These weren't mere pirates, but Varric's loyalists, cold-eyed and efficient. Not a rescue, an execution squad. Dane's heart hammered. He could picture Shira in her cell, defiant, proud, and entirely alone. Gunfire sparked off the walls as he closed the distance. The blast doors to the detention wing shuddered, hinges straining as the attackers deployed cutting torches. "Hold the line!" a guard shouted, before a stun blast sent him sprawling. Smoke curled beneath the sealed door to Shayara's cell. Dane punched his comm, voice ragged. "Bridge, this is Dane. I'm at Section 4. Enemy breach imminent. I need backup now." Static hissed back at him. The ship rocked again, and the lights flickered. He was on his own. The cell door's lock whined in protest, and with a metallic shriek, the barrier buckled inward. Dane braced his weapon, eyes narrowed, pulse roaring in his ears. "Shayara, get down!" he shouted, voice hoarse over the alarm. The attackers surged into the cell, but Shayara was already moving. She erupted from the shadows in a blur of claws and muscle, braids flying. Her striped tail was a whip, lashing out to trip and disarm. The first mercenary fell to the ground, wind knocked out of him as Shayara's knee slammed into his chest. Another swung a rifle. She ducked, rolled, and slashed his wrist. Blood sprayed the wall. Dane fired at a third attacker, catching him in the shoulder. The mercenary crumpled, weapon clattering away. Shayara used the distraction, leaping atop a fourth opponent, her claws flashing, eyes wild with battle fury. In the chaos, her gaze met Dane's, a silent understanding passing between them. Fight as one, or fall apart. They moved in tandem, backs pressed together as enemies closed in from both sides. Dane's shots were precise, controlled. He covered Shayara's flanks while she darted in and out of the attacker's reach, a living storm. A mercenary swung a baton at Dane, who blocked with his forearm just as Shayara swept the man's legs out from under him. "Left!" Dane barked, and Shayara spun, raking her claws across another opponent's helmet, tearing the visor free. Her tail lashed a pistol from the attacker's grip. Dane seized the opportunity, landing a punch that dropped the mercenary for good. They pressed forward, a seamless team. Adrenaline burned away hesitation, burned away the memory of cages and interrogations and distrust. All that remained was survival. Another explosion rattled the corridor. "This way!" Dane yelled, grabbing Shayara's arm. Together they ducked into a side passage, sprinting through a maze of maintenance tunnels, the sounds of battle fading behind them. They ran until their breath came in ragged gasps, ducking through a hatch and slamming it shut. For a moment, silence, broken only by their thundering hearts. They slumped against the cold bulkhead, sweat beading on their skin, uniforms torn and streaked with grime. The air in the cramped service crawl space was hot, metallic, filled with the lingering tang of ozone and fear. Dane's hands trembled as he holstered his weapon. He turned to Shiara, eyes roving over her face, searching for injury, and finding none, only the wild brightness of adrenaline and relief. "You saved us," he said, voice rough, barely more than a whisper. "You're incredible." Shiara's breathing slowed. For the first time, she did not retreat from his touch. His hand rose, tentative, and brushed the curve of her cheek, following the path of her dark stripes. Her fur was soft beneath his fingers, and she closed her eyes, leaning into the warmth of his palm. He marveled at her, at the strength in her jaw, and the vulnerability flickering in her golden eyes. "You fought like nothing I've ever seen," he murmured. "Not just for yourself. For both of us." Her lips parted, and a small, unguarded sound escaped her. A chuff, almost a laugh, almost a sob. Her hand rose, hesitant, then bold, fingers threading into his hair. She tugged him closer until their foreheads touched, breaths mingling in the tight space. "Dane," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are not like the others." He tilted his head, his lips brushing hers. The contact was light at first, delicate, uncertain, as if either might pull away. But neither did. She pressed closer, her hand slipping to the nape of his neck, claws gentle. Their lips met fully, and the world narrowed to the heat between them, the press of bodies desperate for comfort, for understanding, for something beyond duty and fear. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her fiercely as if she might vanish if he let go. Her tail curled around his waist, possessive, anchoring them together. Their kiss was hungry, electric, a collision of alien and human, of captor and captive, of two souls stripped bare by danger and longing. The barrier between them dissolved, burned away by crisis and need. In that secret place, with the echoes of battle behind them and the threat of Varric's betrayal still looming, nothing mattered but the truth in their touch and the promise in their embrace. For her safety and his peace of mind, Shiara was moved to quarters adjoining Dane's. The two rooms were separated by a single locked door, but the security code was child's play for anyone with her skill. They both knew the barrier could be crossed at any moment. Their nearness was constant, a silent current thrumming between the bulkheads. Night after night, Dane found himself acutely aware of her presence. He'd catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of his eye, Shiara stretching, her fur catching the light in bands of golden shadow, the ripple of muscle beneath stripes. She moved with feline grace, every motion confident, unself-conscious. Sometimes, when the light hit her just so, her features softened, and Dane glimpsed the vulnerability beneath her warrior's exterior. For her part, Shiara studied him with an intensity that disarmed him. She watched the way his hands moved over tactical maps, the strength in his arms, the lines of worry that carved themselves into his brow when the future seemed uncertain. She noticed the gentleness in him, how he treated even the lowest crewman with respect, how he remembered to order real coffee for the night shift, how he listened, truly listened, to every idea at the table. Their planning sessions grew longer, more heated. They stood shoulder to shoulder at the briefing console, heads bent together over maps and encrypted transmissions. The metallic tang of the Resolute's recycled air mingled with Shiara's wild, earthy musk. Dane found it grounding, primal, a reminder that she was both alien and, achingly, real. "Varric will strike again soon," Shiara murmured one evening, her tail flicking behind her as she gestured at a cluster of hostile fleet signatures. "He always presses the advantage." Dane nodded, their arms brushing as he adjusted the map. "He's predictable, then." "Ambitious, not predictable," she corrected, lips curling into a smirk. "He covets the crown, but lacks the patience to win it outright." Their eyes met, challenge and understanding flickering between them. Dane's hand lingered a moment too long on hers, fingers brushing the backs of her claws. She let him, her gaze softening for a heartbeat. As the hours slipped away, so did their restraint. Glances lingered, the distance between them shrinking each night. One night, after a marathon of strategy and debate, Dane sat slouched at his desk, the soft glow of schematics illuminating his face. He heard the gentle click of a lock, then the hush of the adjoining door sliding open. He looked up. Shiara stood framed in the doorway, her eyes luminous in the half-light. She wore a simple shirt and loose trousers, her fur ruffled, tail curling behind her. She said nothing, simply watching him with a hunger that sent a shiver through his chest. Dane rose, the chair scraping softly across the deck. He crossed the room in 3 steps, every nerve on fire. He held out his hand. Open. Inviting. You don't have to ask. She took his hand, claws careful, her grip warm and steady. He pulled her close, feeling the heat of her body, the rapid beat of her heart echoing his own. Their lips met in the middle, tentative at first, then deeper, exploring. Dane tasted salt, wildness, something sharp and sweet, and Shiara pressed against him, her fur rasping across his skin, her hands sliding up beneath his shirt to trace the planes of his back. Her claws, once weapons, were now a caress, gentle, reverent, possessive. He cupped her jaw, marveling at the contrast between soft fur and strong bone. She nipped at his lower lip, laughter rumbling in her chest, her tail coiled around his thigh, anchoring them. Dane's hands roamed her sides, memorizing the dips and curves, the scars she wore like badges. They moved together to the narrow bunk, never breaking contact. Each touch was a question, each gasp an answer. The boundaries between human and alien, officer and captive, dissolved into shared heat and trust. After, Shiara curled against him, head on his shoulder. Her fingers traced patterns on his chest as he twined a braid of her hair around his finger. For a long time, they simply breathed, letting the intimacy settle between them like a shield against the world. Their secret affair deepened their partnership. The next day, their collaboration stunned the Terran command. Together, they anticipated Varric's feints and devised a counteroffensive so cunning that even veteran admirals were left speechless. "You two have become quite the team," Commander Sloan remarked one morning, eyeing their synchronized movements with suspicion and grudging respect. Dane shrugged, his expression carefully neutral. "She's a fast learner." Shiara smirked. "Or perhaps you Terrans are just slow." In private, the walls between them fell away. They shared the burdens of leadership and the loneliness that came with it. Shiara confided her fears for her people, her guilt at being used as a pawn in Varric's game. Dane told her of his failures, the weight of every decision, the sleepless nights spent wondering if he'd chosen correctly. One evening, as the ship drifted in the shadow of a dead moon, Shiara sat cross-legged on Dane's floor, a holographic map hovering between them. Her tail flicked restlessly as she hesitated, then reached out to touch a cluster of hidden coordinates. "There is a data vault here," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Tigran intelligence, everything Varric has done, every secret, every betrayal, will be stored there. If you have it, you have leverage. But it is well guarded. I should not tell you this." Dane knelt beside her, his hand covering hers. "Why are you telling me?" She met his gaze, eyes shining with trust and fear. "Because I believe in you, and because I do not want to be alone in this any longer." His heart twisted at her vulnerability. He squeezed her hand, his voice rough. "You're not alone, Shiara. Not anymore." They sat in silence, the map glowing between them, the future uncertain but no longer so lonely. Their alliance, born in adversity, sealed in trust, had become something stronger than either had imagined. As they leaned into each other, sharing warmth and hope, the bond between them deepened, carrying them into the unknown together. The strategy room hummed with nervous energy, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen, adrenaline, and fear. Banks of holoscreens cast shifting blue light over the assembled officers. At the center, Dane stood rigid, jaw clenched, Shiara at his side. Her presence was an anchor. Her golden eyes swept the star maps with practiced precision, tail flicking in tense anticipation. A hush fell as Shiara tapped a cluster of coordinates on the main display. "Varric's fleet depends on these supply lines," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "If you strike here and here, you'll sever his reinforcements. The data vault's transmissions will confirm his treachery. We must act before he silences more witnesses." Dane nodded, shoulders squared. "You heard her. Prepare the strike teams. I want every wing leader ready in 10 minutes. The officers moved, murmurs rippling through the room. Shira lingered close, voice dropping as she studied the shifting readouts. "The nebula's shadow will mask your approach," she whispered, her breath warm against Dane's ear. "But Varric will anticipate a frontal assault, hit his support ships, force him to overcommit. I'll guide you." Dane placed his hand over hers, just for a moment. "I trust you." "I always have." The operation began in silence, the Resolute ghosting through the ragged edges of a blue-white nebula. Stars flickered beyond the hull, but the bridge was awash in the cold glow of battle readiness. Shiara's insights fed directly into Dane's command console, her voice crackling over the comms, urgent, precise, unwavering. "Support ships on Vector 9. Commander Yal commands them. He is ambitious, quick to prove himself. When the Terran phalanx charges, he will commit his full force." She paused, scanning sensor data. "Their shields cycle down after each volley. Strike then, and the line will buckle." Dane relayed the orders, voice steady. "Squadrons, stand by. Target support ships. Vector 9. Wait for the shield cycle, then hit them hard. Shiara, count it down." Lights flickered as the battle began. The Resolute's hull shuddered, missiles streaking past the viewports. Across the void, Tigran and Terran ships danced a deadly waltz, maneuvering, firing, dying. Shiara's voice was calm amid the storm. "Wait. Now. Shields are down. Attack." The Terran squadrons surged forward, unleashing a withering salvo. Explosions bloomed in the darkness, support ships crumpling under the barrage. Panic rippled through Varric's command net. "Commander Yal is retreating," a comms officer shouted, disbelief in her tone. On the main screen, an encrypted data feed burst to life. Shiara's evidence, the contents of the Tigran data vault, now streaming to every ship in the sector. Varric's voice echoed through the fleet, his orders laced with venom and treachery. The proof of his betrayal was undeniable. Dane watched as confusion spread through the enemy ranks. Tigran captains shouted across open comms, demanding answers. A gunship broke formation, then another. Tigran on Tigran as mutiny erupted. The traitors were dragged from their bridges. Loyalists seized control, turning their guns on Varric's flagship. Shiara's claws gripped the edge of the console, her breath shallow. "It's working. The coup is collapsing." Varric's flagship fired wildly, desperate and alone, before being engulfed in a storm of blue and gold fire. The battle was over. The Resolute limped away from the field, hull scorched, systems battered. Damage teams worked feverishly to contain fires and seal breaches. Medical teams filled the corridors, bearing the wounded and the dying. Dane sat at his desk, casualty reports open before him. Each name was a wound, men and women lost under his command, faces he would never forget. Grief etched deep lines in his face. His hands shook as he set the tablet aside. He heard soft footsteps. Shiara slipped into the room, her stripes dimmed, eyes heavy with her own sorrow. She crossed to him in silence and placed her hand gently over his. He looked up, searching her gaze, finding only understanding. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick. "This victory came at a terrible price." He squeezed her hand, words failing him. Instead, he pulled her close. They clung to each other, sharing warmth and grief. The intimacy between them now gentle, touched with sorrow. No words were needed. Comfort was found in touch, in the simple act of holding on. Later, in the quiet aftermath, peace talks began. Hollow conference tables replaced war rooms, and for the first time in years, Terran and Tigran envoys sat across from one another as equals. Shiara, now interim leader of her people, became the symbol of hope, a living bridge between worlds. She stood before the assembled delegates, her voice unwavering. "We have all lost too much," she declared. "We must honor the fallen not with more blood, but with peace. There is another way. I have seen it. I have lived it." Her eyes found Dane in the crowd, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, longing, the promise of a future not defined by war. Negotiations were tense, fraught with old wounds and suspicion, but Shiara argued fiercely. She drew on everything she had learned: Dane's empathy, Terran pragmatism, the need for justice rather than vengeance. She spoke of trust, of risk, of the courage it took to lay down arms and reach for something better. Bit by bit, walls came down. Terms were drafted, exchanged, revised. The first true peace in a generation began to take shape. Fragile, precious, hard-won. In stolen moments between sessions, Dane and Shiara found one another. Sometimes it was a brief touch of hands beneath the table. Sometimes a quiet embrace in a shadowed corridor. Their bond, forged in crisis and sealed by sacrifice, was their refuge and their strength. On the last night before the treaty was signed, Shiara stood at the viewport watching the stars wheel by. Dane came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist, his chin resting atop her head. "Will it last?" he asked, voice soft. She leaned into him, her tail curling around his wrist. "We will make it last," she promised. Together. Peace had come, not as a gift, but as a victory. And as dawn broke over the battered hull of the Resolute, Shiara and Dane stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future would bring. Sunlight streamed through the crystalline arches of Unity Station's ceremonial hall, illuminating the gathered crowd with a glow that was both alien and achingly familiar. The air was hushed, charged with the kind of anticipation reserved for moments that would ripple through history. Delegates from both the Terran and Tigran worlds stood shoulder to shoulder, adversaries made into uneasy partners by hope and hard-earned trust. At the center of it all, Shiara stood resplendent, a living emblem of change. Gold and deep green robes clung to her tall, powerful form, the intricate patterns echoing her own stripes. Her braids were threaded with emerald, and when she moved, the beads whispered against her fur. The sunlight caught her, turning her into something mythic, a leader, not merely a survivor. She signed the treaty with a flourish, her clawed hand steady as she pressed her palm to the document. Opposite her, Dane waited, crisp in his formal Terran uniform. Medals gleamed on his chest, his bearing as composed as ever, though only Shiara would notice the slight tremor in his hands as he picked up the pen. He added his name to the treaty, his signature looping beside hers, a declaration of peace, but also of the journey that had brought them to this hall. For the world, Dane and Shiara stood as pillars of duty, their roles honored but their bond hidden behind protocol and ceremony. Yet across the crowded room, their eyes found each other, the moment stretching and quiet. All the words they could not say hovered in that look: relief, pride, longing, and something fierce and bright that refused to be caged by circumstance. Commander Sloane, standing guard along the perimeter, caught the exchange and raised an eyebrow at Ambassador Reyes. The ambassador's lips twitched in a knowing half-smile. Between them, an unspoken understanding passed. Some alliances were forged on more than treaties. Later, as the celebrations faded and the station returned to its quiet rotations, the Resolute lay docked, a battered giant at rest. In Dane's quarters, the connecting door stood wide open, a silent invitation that needed no explanation. Shira stood by the viewport, gazing into the infinite velvet of space. Starlight traced her silhouette, making her fur shimmer with silver and gold. She was out of uniform, dressed instead in something soft and flowing, her tail flicking idly as she watched the silent ballet of ships in the docking array. Her posture was regal, but tinged with uncertainty, as if unsure what came next now that the war was truly over. Dane entered quietly, his footsteps soft on the deck. He paused in the doorway, taking in the sight of her, so close, yet still radiant with the wildness that had first drawn him in. "It's done," he said, his voice gentle. "The war is over." Shira turned, emotion welling in her golden eyes, making them glow even in the half-light. She searched his face, and for a moment her composure faltered, exposing the raw vulnerability beneath. "So our paths split now?" she asked, voice low. There was a tremor to it, a fear that had nothing to do with war. Dane shook his head and crossed the room, his eyes never leaving hers. "Not if we choose otherwise. We built something here. Shira. A bridge. A future. One that doesn't end just because the fighting has." He reached up, brushing his thumb along her furred cheek, marveling at the way she leaned into his touch. He felt the strength there, but also the trust she'd given him, fragile as new peace. "Wherever you go, I'll follow," Dane said softly, his words thick with promise. "If peace is to last, we lead together. Not as symbols, but as ourselves." Shira's hand found his, her claws gentle as they tangled in his fingers. Her lips parted and a slow, rare smile curled there. Shy, proud, hopeful. "Together then," she said. He bent, pressing his lips to hers. No longer a kiss of desperation, but of hope, of choices made and futures claimed. Her arms slipped around him, drawing him close, their bodies fitting with the ease of long practice. This time, they kissed slowly, deeply, savoring every nuance, the texture of her fur against his skin, the thrum of her pulse beneath his hand, the way his presence grounded her in a world forever changed. When they parted, Shira glanced at the open door. She stepped past it, crossing the threshold into his quarters, a simple act transformed into an oath. Her move was deliberate, her eyes never leaving Dane's as she set down her few belongings. She belonged to no one but herself, but she chose him, just as he chose her. The barriers, doors, uniforms, the scars of war, fell away, leaving only what they had built together. Trust, hope, the fragile beginnings of something greater than both their worlds. Side by side, they turned to face the stars, the promise of the unknown stretching before them. Their future was uncertain, uncharted, but it was theirs to claim. No longer captor and captive, no longer adversaries. Partners in every sense, forging a new destiny beyond the boundaries of war and history, together. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.